In the Bible, the extraordinary stories of two men who did not experience death in a conventional manner but were taken alive from this world by God, are narrated. These two men are Enoch and the prophet Elijah, who despite living in different times and circumstances, share the uniqueness of having been taken to heaven without dying. Enoch, mentioned in the book of Genesis, lived in a period before the flood. He is described as a man who feared God and was distinct from his contemporaries. Father of Methuselah, who according to the Bible, lived longer than any other human being, Enoch was also Noah's grandfather. The Bible narrates that Enoch walked with God, and then, he was no more, because God took him. This concise and mysterious passage has sparked debates among scholars about whether Enoch's age, 365 years, should be interpreted literally or symbolically. On the other hand, the story of the prophet Elijah is detailed more thoroughly in the scriptures. Elijah carried out his prophetic ministry in the 9th century BC, at a time of deep idolatry in Israel, promoted by Jezebel, the wife of King Ahab. Elijah, as a faithful prophet of Yahweh, vehemently opposed idolatry, and at one point in his life, discouraged by the lack of fidelity to God in Israel, even asked for death. However, instead of death, Elijah was taken to heaven in a chariot of fire. This event, narrated in the books of Kings, is one of the most dramatic and visually striking in the Bible. Elijah's story stands out not only for this miraculous ending but also for his life full of miracles, confrontations with idolatry, and deep fidelity to God. These stories of Enoch and Elijah raise fascinating questions about human destiny and the relationship with the divine. What made these men chosen to avoid death? Was there something in their character or their relationship with God that set them apart? The Bible does not offer detailed answers, but their stories suggest that deep communion with God and a life of faithfulness can lead to extraordinary spiritual experiences. Unlike Enoch and Elijah, other biblical figures like Moses, although they had unconventional deaths, did experience physical death. Moses, for example, died and was buried by God in a miraculous manner, as detailed in Deuteronomy 34:6. Similarly, figures like the Apostle Paul and John experienced raptures in spirit, but continued their normal lives until their natural death. The stories of Enoch and Elijah are unique in the scriptures, representing not only the possibility of a different destiny for human beings but also highlighting the power and mystery of faith in God. These narratives invite reflection on the nature of life, death, and the special relationship certain individuals can have with the divine. The rapture of Enoch and Elijah raises intriguing questions about why they were taken to heaven without experiencing physical death, a common experience to all human beings. While some argue that this contradicts the idea that death is a consequence of sin, it's important to understand that these events are related to God's sovereignty and have deep meaning in the biblical narrative. The story of Enoch is found in the book of Genesis, where it is mentioned that he walked with God and disappeared because God took him. This mysterious disappearance has led to various interpretations throughout history. The letter to the Hebrews highlights that Enoch was taken away because of his faith. It's not about his personal perfection, but about his relationship of faith with God that made him worthy to be taken away in the same manner as believers are redeemed by faith in Jesus Christ. The prophet Elijah, on the other hand, lived in a time of apostasy in Israel. He bravely fought against idolatry and defended the worship of the true God. His rapture to heaven occurred after his confrontation with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. Although in a moment of despair he asked God to take his life, instead, God strengthened him and took him to heaven in a whirlwind and a chariot of fire. Elijah was a man passionate for God's cause, and his rapture is a testimony to how God honors those who are faithful to his call. The central question is why God chose to take Enoch and Elijah alive instead of allowing them to experience death. The answer lies in divine sovereignty. God has absolute control over life and death and can take his servants according to his unique plan and purpose. The rapture of Enoch and Elijah also anticipates the biblical truth that there will be believers alive who will be transformed in the twinkling of an eye when Christ returns. These extraordinary events should not be interpreted as rewards for personal holiness, but as manifestations of divine grace and mystery. Ultimately, they remind us that God operates in ways that often exceed our human understanding, and that His plan for each individual is unique. The story of Enoch and Elijah continues to be a mystery but illustrates the sovereignty and grace of God in the lives of His servants, and how His plan can surpass our human expectations. When we closely observe the biblical narrative, we find two exceptional men who were favored by God in a remarkable way. The Bible tells us that Enoch walked with God, indicating he had an intimate and close relationship with the Creator. His faith and devotion were so remarkable that God decided to take him to heaven without experiencing physical death. This act of taking Enoch alive to heaven was an unparalleled act of divine grace. To better understand this event, it's important to highlight that death is a consequence of sin in the world. All human beings, since Adam, are subject to death due to original sin. However, Enoch was an exception to this rule. God took him for Himself, preserving him from earthly death. This exception shows us that God is sovereign and can act according to His divine will at any time. On the other hand, we have Elijah, a brave prophet who lived in a time when Israel had turned away from God. Despite the great opposition he faced due to his steadfastness and faith, Elijah remained faithful to the Lord. In a moment of despair, he even asked that God take him home to heaven. And God responded in an astonishing way. Elijah was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind, accompanied by a chariot of fire. This experience also illustrates divine grace in the lives of those who trust in God amidst trials. Both cases, that of Enoch and Elijah, remind us that God's grace has no limits. They were taken alive to heaven not by their own merits, but by the faith they had in the Lord. This leads us to the fundamental doctrine of justification by faith, emphasizing that we are declared righteous before God not by our works, but by our faith in Christ. It is essential to understand that these raptures are not mere exceptions to the rule of death but also point towards the future. The Bible teaches that when Christ returns, there will be a rapture of all the living redeemed. Their bodies will be transformed, and they will not pass through death. Enoch and Elijah are a type of what will happen at that glorious event. In summary, the story of Enoch and Elijah shows us the unfathomable love and grace of God towards those who trust in Him. These men were taken alive to heaven as a testimony of justification by faith and as a preview of what will occur in the future rapture of living believers. Let us always remember that God's grace is abundant and wonderful. If you have found value in this analysis, please like the video and share it with your friends, family, and anyone interested in learning more about these biblical topics. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss future discussions and analyses. Until next time, and may God bless you.